I'm James.
I'm Carrie.
I'm Lacey.
And I'm Lee. Just one more fix.
A proud member of the Gonna Geek Network.
Just like the show you're listening to now.
The opinions expressed are those of each individual host.
Check out all the other podcasts at GonnaGeekNetwork.com.
And get ready, because geekiness begins in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to episode 118 of Better Podcasting. Today, we talk about ways to objectively assess your show based on feedback.
In this week's Better Podcasting Download, we talk about a familiar podcast brand that's been acquired by somebody.
But before we get to any of that, we've got to give away an Audio-Technica AT2005 and take a How I Say My Podcast story.
Lauren, there's no need to make new credits. SP and I are back. Dilly dilly.
Welcome to Better Podcasting, a show where we talk about podcast tips, tools, and best practices to help you succeed with your podcast. What makes us different? Well, just like you, we podcast purely out of the love and fun of it. Podcasting is our hobby, and we recognize that it's yours too. We always encourage your questions and feedback, and you can find all of our contact information at betterpodcasting.com. Here's your host for the show, Stephen John Drew and Stargate Pioneer.
Welcome to episode 118 of Better Podcasting. I am Stephen John Drew, and with me, of course, is Stargate Pioneer.
Or SP, as I prefer to be called, but thank you very much. It is great to be back and not arguing with my co-host anymore, or fake arguing, full arguing, whatever you
No, there was legitimate contract disagreement, and we resolved that now, so you can guarantee that we will be around for at least this episode. The contract's only good for this episode.
Now we're starting to sound like U.S. Congress.
All right, so we're here today with another episode of Better Podcasting. If you haven't checked out the show before, we like to talk about all of the ways you can make your podcast better, including making it better. Haha, there's a tie-in to last week's episode.
Indeed, they put the heart and not the fart in better podcasting.
So we'll touch on that in a minute. However, one thing that we are doing here today is giving away a brand new Audio-Technica AT2005 because we hope that will make your show a little bit better. Isn't that right, SP?
Indeed, this sweetheart is USB, it's XLR, and it's a dynamic cardioid microphone, which means it's preferred for podcasting because in general, podcasters aren't using a sound-treated environment, so this just helps. It aids your sound to be better podcasting sound than anything before. Anyway, we've had this giveaway going for a couple of months now. We shut it off at the end of January 2018. We asked, what was your favorite episode of Better Podcasting in 2017? Some of you went back farther in the catalog, but we took those anyway. What we didn't take was your show name. So anybody that entered, please let us know what your show names are, what your show names want to be, and we will talk about that on the show. In the meantime, we are ready to actually draw for the giveaway. Stephen, you want to go ahead and draw?
Okay, sure. So we're going to go ahead and draw this out for you audio listeners from the from a hat at random. If you want to see this done on video, you can check that out at youtube.com/GonnaGeek or over at betterpodcasting.com. And we have the winner, which again, no sound effects here because we're cheap. It is Rebecca Schultz. Yes. So Rebecca, please get in touch with us. You can email podcast@betterpodcasting.com and let us know how we can get this shipped over to you. So congratulations, Rebecca. Now,
and just to point out, though, Jason Bryant, who was hosting last week, also entered when he hosted before back in December. So his name was in the hat as well. Jason, I'm sorry you didn't get it.
That's mean. It was kind of I feel like you were a little curt there, but yes, congratulations to Rebecca. Rebecca, we do appreciate you entering, and we appreciate everybody entering. We hope that this makes your podcast just a little bit better. Now, speaking of better podcasting, if you did indeed miss last week's episode, Well, you should go back and check that out. Episode 117 over at betterpodcasting.com/117. And we had a couple of people take over our show. That's right. We were out because, as we all know, SP and I are terrible at podcasting. So we had a couple of people take over the show. Jason Bryant, as well as the wonderful Emily Prokop. And they definitely turned that into a roast of ours. And we had no idea that was going to be a roast, did we, SP?
No idea. That was harsh to have to sit back and watch that live because they had control of the show. We weren't trying to inject ourselves at all. So yeah, we were sitting back there and just waiting for it to happen. And yeah, thanks guys. You really took it to us.
Now, during this roast, Jason tried to take a little bit of a shot at us, and he pointed out that we like to make the listeners do the work. And yeah, here's the thing is he thought that he was being clever, but he was honestly just being serious and telling things straight up as they are. Little did he know that he himself was the one that brainstormed the whole concept of the takeover. Let's take a walk down memory lane down to episode 110, way back in December of 2017 when he substituted for myself.
So that's it for this week. Jason, I want to say thank you very much for coming on this show because Steven ditched me.
This show?
This show. Better.
I don't know. So we've had, so now between me and Emily as replacements, these might be your two best shows ever.
I'm sure they are. We'll have to set it out for a vote for everybody. Which show is better, Emily or you or Emily?
Well, no, it's not me. There is no or with me and Emily. It's me and Emily, like collectively or a co-host, like one of them two. That's a team there. It's not like a split three ways. It's either us or him.
So yeah, obviously it's always going to be you two. It is never me. That's the obvious choice here. And so yes, I absolutely ripped off your idea. I heard you say that, and I said, SP, we are doing a takeover episode with the two. That is no word of a lie. That's exactly how that happens. So kudos for the idea, Jason.
I did not have a say in it. Steven said, we're going to do it. And I said, oh, that's a great idea. What if I don't want to do it? We're still doing it. Okay, well, yeah. I guess that's what we're doing.
But seriously, you two did an amazing job. Yes, you did roast us hard, but it was a lot of fun. And a little inside baseball here. SP and I were actually connected live. I was doing the video switching. He was still connected, Skype watching the whole thing. And they both did a fantastic job. And we were texting back and forth like high school girls, just back and forth all the episode. And just like the wonderful plot from Mean Girls, I was very upset.
You were indeed. So beware, Emily and Jason. Paybacks can be harsh.
But seriously, thank you. You did a fantastic job. Now let's move into our How I Saved My Podcast. That's right. We have this segment here where we like to talk about how you have saved your podcast. We encourage you to send an audio clip or send us a video or even just send us an email and tell us, how did you save your podcast? If something went wrong and you made sure to save that, tell us about it, because we're all about the communal learning here. And again, we like to make you make our show. So we'll absolutely steal your content and put it on here. So send us a clip of that, such as how this wonderful listener sent us this one.
Hi there, Better Podcasting. Long-time listener, first-time voice clip sender. I just wanted to send in a How I Saved My Podcast story. I hope you enjoy this. So picture this. This was last week. I had just finished recording one of my podcasts that I do each week, and I'd gone upstairs, away from where I do my podcasts, to start watching TV. A few minutes later, my wife came home and said, "Hey, hon, your computer is making quite the buzzing noise." To which at first I thought it was a hard drive, because I'd been copying stuff over to a hard drive. After a moment or so, I realized that no, that's definitely not a hard drive, and it was a very, very loud hum. So I came down to my computer and I found that all 4 channels of my Behringer MDX 4600 were lit up and were emitting this hum. I ended up quickly shutting off my equipment, thinking maybe there was feedback or maybe there was something else going on, but no, that hum was still going on. So I looked at my control panel for my sound cards because, well, I've got 4 different sound cards that go out to my MDX 4600, and none of them were sending out a signal. to which I promptly realized there was a somewhat burning smell. You know, that electrical burning smell? So yeah, I quickly shut off my gear and felt my MDX 4600, and it was quite hot. In fact, while I was taking the screws out of my rack, which was a custom-built rack mount that I built, I think I did a wonderful job, I felt that the unit was quite hot. So anyways, it obviously was defective, and how I ended up saving my podcast was because 2 days later, I was going to be doing a special episode of my show where I had a couple of guests take over the podcast. I know, it sounds like a pretty incredible idea if you ask me. So what I did was I stripped out everything. I pulled out the MDX 4600, I pulled out all of the associated cables, and then I just took the channels right from the sound card and I plugged them into my wonderful Zoom L12. And it's just awesome that I had that L12 because I was able to just quickly put those cables in, get everything all back up and going, and just bypass the MDX 4600. So there you go. That's how I saved my podcast, was basically ended up tearing apart all of my cables just to get those rewired in, and it was worth it because their cables were crossed. In fact, I had extra cables in there that I didn't realize that I had, and I was able to get that all up and going. And here's the kicker of what I really did, was I ended up making sure to allocate a little bit extra time before I connected with those guest hosts so that we could make sure everything was set up and working properly. This allowed us to have minimal impact, but still get my levels properly configured. So I just adapted the schedule. So there you go. That's how I saved my podcast. Wanted to send that in. Wanted to say that you think you do an awesome job on here, Steven. I think that you're wonderful. And I really, really, really like that guest host that you keep bringing back. I think that he's a pretty good contributor to the podcast. But I think, though, that you just are phenomenal. And if you ever want to shake it up and you want to get another guest host, feel free to give me a call. I'm happy to help you out. So keep up the good work, Steven. I think you're wonderful and quite dreamy.
You know, I think I can leave you two to be alone right now, and you can do the rest of the episode by yourselves, right?
Yeah, well, I don't know who this listener was, but thank you very much, listener. It sounds like you had quite the ordeal last week before your special episode of where a couple of people took over your episode, and glad to hear you were able to make things all work, and maybe sometime you should come on the show and talk a little bit more about that. I understand you had a really good run with Behringer equipment so far, but it was inevitable that one day you were going to have a piece fail. However, very cool that you were still able to save it, and I'm sorry to hear you had the problem, but I'm glad to hear that you've had a pretty good run overall with Behringer equipment. So yeah, obviously it was just a matter of time.
I want to see you and this listener on the podcast at the same time.
So let's go ahead and move on to our main topic. So this week we are talking about objectively assessing your show. In the past, we've talked about ways that you can receive feedback, and we've even talked about ways that you can effectively craft feedback. But today, let's be honest here. Let's talk about how being on the receiving end of feedback can be very, very tough, especially when it's constructive criticism. So today we want to talk about ways that you can take that feedback, digest it, and really just objectively assess your show. Right, SP?
Yeah, it's all great things to talk about, so we're going to talk about it. But first off, we have to get this out of the way. It is your show that we're talking about. You can do whatever it is that you want. You don't have to listen to what somebody else has to say. You can go ahead, continue on your way without a care in the world. However, that sort of attitude could lead to people not listening because it could be constructive feedback that might be beneficial to your show. So you may want to at least assess the feedback and then see where you want to go from there.
Absolutely. Now, as far as actually processing the feedback goes, for you to effectively process this feedback, you're going to have to authentically buy into receiving it. This means you're going to need to find a way to open yourself to a different point of view. Try to look at feedback as a gift. Somebody's taking their valuable time and reaching out to you to give their point of view on something. Well, sometimes the knee-jerk reaction can be for somebody just to complain. If you think about it from this point of view, it would actually be easier for them to be lazy and not send you that feedback. So they are taking time. They are actually taking the non-lazy route to send you feedback. This means that they're putting in effort, and because they're putting in effort, they probably have something that they feel is important to say.
You should not always go with your gut reaction on the feedback. You should allow yourself a little bit of time to reflect on the feedback, because it will include both negative and positive feedback. And for example, somebody might encourage you to keep doing a segment that you announced, or you are announcing that you're going to end. And while this is super positive, ultimately you did announce the end of the segment because you decided it was time to go. And does one listener's, and this is the key that really started us talking about this whole topic to begin with, does this one listener's opinion change the reasons behind your decision to end that particular segment or make any sort of change with your show to begin with? So for negative feedback, this can allow you to come back and read it with a fresh set of eyes. As humans, we are emotional. So when we start to read something again that's negative, often our vision becomes clouded and we see things through negative eyes. It becomes very easy to dismiss and tune out the important parts of the message because it's negative, or it's just not something that we want to hear. So taking a breath and rereading that feedback, either immediately or like the next day, sleep on it and reread it the next day, can often help you see the important part of the message. For example, proper constructive criticism should offer a suggestion or solution to the problem being raised, right? You're not only saying what's wrong, but a suggestion on how to improve it. If someone sends you an email with this sort of feedback, you might see the problem, get upset, and totally miss the solution part of it. But when you come back and read it a second time, you may actually notice that solution, and that might get your creative juices flowing to either accept that solution or maybe propose to yourself an alternative solution that would work even better.
Absolutely. That little bit of time can make the world of difference on how you read and process that feedback. Another thing that you might want to do with said feedback is feel free to table the idea. Don't always feel that you have to take action right away. Tabling an idea is absolutely an okay thing to do, and sometimes it can be the best thing to do with the idea. You could create a document to put the idea in, you could use a physical whiteboard, or even just a little folder within your email to put these sort of shelved and tabled ideas. Now, there is a big benefit to doing this, because if you table an idea, you might get more feedback down the road that helps prioritize. If you all of a sudden you have a bunch of people saying, I think you should make this change, well, then maybe that's your listener speaking. Or you might end up having a bunch of people say the contrary to that one suggestion, which shows, no, your gut reaction was right. So sometimes tabling an idea can be beneficial to properly processing and assessing that feedback. You also might find that if you end up tabling this idea, you can help prioritize your workload, because let's say that you've decided to go through with a couple of different ideas, a couple different changes. You got to make time for those changes. So if you table them, you can see them somewhere that you can actually go, no, I think this is the one that I want to do.
Right. So if you're thinking on making changes based on that feedback, I would recommend, I think we would both recommend, that you create a pros and cons list. And podcasting can be a very personal experience because you talk directly to the listener. I mean, if you're listening to this right now, you're listening to me speak into your ears. Thank you very much for letting us in and for being a subscriber to Better Podcasting. But this can sometimes lead to an inclination to please people, which actually could potentially be disastrous for your product if you take the advice of just one person. So if you create that pros and cons list that I was talking about, you may be able to curb some problems before you execute those solutions. So this list can help you assess whether or not the feedback is appropriate for your show. Does it lead you to do something that would be outside the norm for your show? Would it benefit your show? Is it the right thing to do for your audience? So while you're keeping this in mind, your goals and purpose for the podcast should also be forefront, right? So just changing the show because of the feedback, change why you do the show. And if it does, it might not be the right thing for your show, or maybe it's also time to reassess your purpose and goals for the show. And do you want to alter the show's purpose because of the feedback you've received? Now, I will challenge you, if you're just receiving one version of feedback, it's probably not appropriate to change your entire premise of your show. However, if you're getting multiple different feedbacks, it might be worth at least assessing that possibility to reassess the purpose and goal of your show.
Absolutely. Now, what are you going to do with the feedback? Obviously, you're going to assess that. You're going to decide how you want to proceed, but you probably also want to respond to this feedback. And responding to the feedback is almost equally as important as properly assessing the feedback. Now, whether or not you want to take action, it's very beneficial to respond to the person who's providing you feedback. We mentioned this already, that the person providing the feedback is taking their own time, and we should respect that, and we should definitely at least give them the courtesy of a response in general. We'll give you a little asterisk on that in a minute there. Now, when you're responding to the feedback, make sure that your response does come off personal, even if it's a short response and it's something that you're not going to execute on. Definitely worth making sure that it comes off as personal, because if it sounds robotic or if it just sounds off like an auto reply, it's probably going to actually distance yourself from that listener rather than, solidify that relationship with them.
Right. So use your discretion, but feel free to explain your course of action, even if it's to table the idea or not implement their idea at all. Remember, it's your property, so you shouldn't feel like you have to explain yourself, but showing someone that their feedback has been listened to and actually acted on one way or the other can really build that connection to the audience. And after all, this is that personal medium, as I spoke about before. You're actually talking mostly to one person on the other end, because that's what podcasting is, talking to at least one person on the other end. So make sure to clearly state that you appreciate the feedback. You start out, thank you very much for providing this feedback. And even in tough situations, spelling out that you appreciate their feedback goes a long way. Remember, feedback is a gift from the listener. This is something that doesn't happen all the time. Trust me, it does not happen all the time. I've gone months on other shows without receiving any feedback to the show. And if a listener has taken their time to give you that gift, you should also reciprocate in kind to that gift.
Absolutely. Now, with that said, there is a bit of an exception, and we're going to mention the T word. This is one that you've probably seen if you've ever been on the internet before, and that's trolls. We don't want to lose the message here that sometimes you will definitely see trolls when you are in the public eye on the internet, and sometimes it's best not to feed the trolls. So you kind of got to assess that feedback, and if that is something that you look at it, and it's maybe not so constructive, that it's just a big long ranter saying how they hate you and how you're the end of the world, that might be a good indication that it's a troll, and that person might not need a response. So if you feed the troll, sometimes the troll grows, and that's not good either.
Are the trolls the things that you put in your garden? Is it the troll?
I'm not sure, because I've often been called the troll, so I it's hard for me to be objective.
I see. Hey, look, gang, as we mentioned, ultimately, this is your podcast that we're talking about. It is your show, and you ultimately probably know what's best, because your listener does not know what's going on behind the scenes. If you're talking with your co-host, if you have an objective to serve with your show, the listener might not know every intricate detail about that. But even then, every piece of feedback is valuable, and if used correctly, if processed correctly, the feedback can be an excellent tool for maintaining the quality of your podcast. This feedback helps you self-reflect on your show. This is an aid for you. And even where you decided to go against the feedback that's being provided by your listener, by objectively assessing your show, you'll know that you've got good reasons to maintain whatever your reasons are, your position on your show, and your show's future. So this is an important part of podcasting. It's a little bit more advanced. It's not the 101, hey, we got a show that started. This is down the road a little bit. And it's something that if you podcast for months or years, you'll run into this, and you just need to know how to handle it correctly and objectively, and beneficially for both you and your listener. And we hope that this has helped you a little bit. If you have more tips on how to assess your show, if you have examples on how that's done, you can always get it into us at Better Podcasting. You can tweet us at Better Pod. You can email us podcast@betterpodcasting.com, and you can get us at facebook.com/betterpodcasting.
And before we get off this topic, I just want to share a personal example on something that I ended up taking and assessing. Was back when I did the comic podcast. Yeah, I've mentioned it before. We had quite the potty mouth. We were definitely an explicit show. And honestly, we didn't really get any negative feedback in that era. I think that it was quite common because podcasting was almost to a degree the anti-radio. You could do whatever you want, right? So then we move on from that, and I start doing the Geek Show, the Gonna Geek Show, and we decide to start clean, but then because some of the hosts involved were explicit, we start doing explicit again, and then we quickly realize, no, we want to go back to clean. Well, when we went back to clean, I got some people who did mention to me that they didn't like, and one of them was a good buddy of mine, they didn't like the censored nature. They didn't like the beep, and they felt that it came off as less authentic. For me, I took that, I assessed that, and I looked at the overall picture of the show, and ultimately I decided for the long burn, it was better to go back clean, and eventually people would learn how to censor themselves, and we wouldn't need the beeps. And we got there eventually. So for the long run, I took that, but I still gave my appreciation for the feedback, and I did explain my reasoning behind it because it was a buddy of mine. But it definitely was something that I didn't end up executing on that. But when I got that feedback, I looked and I said, yeah, did the comic book show explicit for so long? Why am I not doing this? And it was just sort of a different time. It was a different type of show. And there was a broader appeal by not being explicit. And I knew that eventually the hosts would learn how to filter themselves. And that's where we ended up.
I also have an example for Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. This is a show that I took over after about 13 episodes. And what they were doing with the show, the original hosts on the show were doing, is it was a quick reaction show on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And I thought we could do better. I thought we could do a more in-depth expose of it, which actually got tremendous feedback. And we wanted to keep doing that. But in that creation, then what we did is we created a news segment, and we put that news segment first. Why? Because another podcast that I had listened to had put their news segment first. But what I didn't realize is they put their news segment first when they were talking about old content. So the news actually was the prime content of those episodes that they were doing. So what I ended up doing is I received a lot of feedback from other co-hosts on other shows that I was doing, Starlight Tribune, Gonna Geek, and we were talking about, look, you need to put the meat of your show first. So if you're going to talk about an episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., you got to put that first before the news, because there's a lot of people that don't care about the news. There's a lot of people that care about your reactions and the ins and outs of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And then you could put the news later, and if people want to go more in depth on the future of the show, then they can listen to that there. But there's spoilers in those news articles. So if you don't want to be spoiled on future episodes, like casting information, perhaps storylines, where they're shooting, then you don't want to listen to the news. So that was important feedback that I then implemented on the show, and we haven't had the news first on Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. in years because of that. So that was some good feedback that I took action on because it made sense.
And that's the key, is properly assessing both of those scenarios. If we just followed our gut reaction, it probably was going to be, well, no, this is my decision, my show. That's the way that it's going to be. And instead we assessed it and looked at it from outside of the box. And in my case, I decided to stay course. In SP's case, he made the change, but we both did the same process. So absolutely great story. And we would love for you to share those stories with us as well. So let's go ahead and move on to the Better Podcasting download.
Welcome to this week's Better Podcasting download.
Contrary to what you might have heard in episode 117, that is not SP nor my voice. So there you go. You can find out who that is by checking out the Gonna Geek Network archives. We're not going to tell you who it is. You can figure it out. Do the legwork yourself. SP, you were the one that linked me this Better Podcasting download this week, so why don't you kick it off?
Yeah, this has been talked about in podcast circles in the last couple of weeks. If you didn't know, but you might be users of Spreaker or Blog Talk Radio. Those companies had been combined. Basically, Spreaker brought out Blog Talk Radio about a year ago or so. Well, they created a new parent company called Voxnest, and Voxnest then took Spreaker and Blog Talk Radio underneath their parentage company. So if you want to know more about that, we can definitely do a more fuller download about who owns what companies and so on and so forth, and are companies public or private and that sort of thing. But this is interesting because Voxnest became the new head, the new face of Spreaker, which I use personally. And I know some people out there still use Blog Talk Radio. We don't recommend it because of the lower quality and the higher price of the platform, but we do know that a lot of people use Spreaker. So we just wanted to give you a heads up in case you didn't already know that Spreaker has been acquired by Voxnest. Basically, a new parent company was created. Now, we use Spreaker on this show. I use Spreaker for all of my shows for the live audio only broadcasting. It's not used as an RSS feed. It's used more as a distribution point for live audio. And I keep the live audio up until the next episode just so you have a reference point for the show. So on their website, if you go to Voxnest, and Vox is spelled V-O-X, nest like a bird's nest, so voxnest.com/about, you will find this information. Behind Voxnest is a diverse team of tech entrepreneurs, media industry veterans, and notable investors. In January 2018, Voxnest acquired Spreaker and Blog Talk Radio and joined a network of solution customers to become the largest podcast monetization platform in the market. Voxnest provides podcast publishers and advertisers with a complete set of podcast management, monetization, and analytics tracking tools. These three tools, by the way, Hive, Dynamo, and Cortex, have been developed using knowledge garnered over years working with and listening to audio content creators, as well as information collected on listener profiles and behavior. They're streamlined solutions that can improve every stage of the production process and help yield greater earnings. Voxnest offers a variety of products to its users: Hive, a complete content management dashboard; Dynamo, a dynamic ad insertion system; and Cortex, a thorough analytics tracking tool. So, Stephen, we looked briefly at this, and we quickly determined that this was definitely a higher level platform, a more professional level platform, not necessarily for your average hobbyist.
Now, I've not signed up. I haven't gone into it. I actually have very limited Spreaker experience. However, when I did head over to Voxnest and had a look, there is a dashboard that looks a lot like a modified version of Spreaker. So I hope we can find some more information behind the scenes, but I'm hoping that what this means is that Voxnest acquired them so that they could use the technology and build this professional level, and then also keep the business going for Spreaker, of course. Blog Talk Radio, I have no idea what the future is there, but I think that's what my fingers are crossed for, because the last thing I'd like to see would be for Spreaker to go away. Spreaker's been good for a lot of people, and I don't know. It's too early, so we'll see, I guess. We'll have to wait and find out.
Exactly. And this is a perfect example of needing to stay attuned to what's happening in this pod space, because you might be using some tools which might eventually go away for whatever reason, or they might actually improve for whatever reason. I mean, all these companies want to make more money. That's why they're in business, to make money. So you would think that as there is more advertisers that come into the space that bring money, and then you have more listeners overall, that you're going to get more professional solutions like this. Now, this, if I look on the surface of their actual podcast offering, their Hive offering, it looks and smells to me a lot like maybe Podcast One, but not being a podcaster with tens of thousands of listeners, I haven't had the opportunity to try out either. But I do know that on their publications on their website, they do say that we need 20,000 downloads in order to use this portion of our service. But there's other portions of the service there other than Hive. There's Dynamo and there's Cortex. So you might want to check it out, see if it's for you. I don't think it's going to be for us. We'll keep tabs on it and we'll let you know over time. But I don't see this as a SoundCloud. This is definitely a podcaster solution. So if you're in the market, like if you do have tens of thousands of listeners, you might want to look at this and see if it's a solution for you.
Absolutely. And you're going to see their name around a lot more. Rob Greenlee has commented on that a little bit. He's from Spreaker, that they're making their presence with the Voxnest name. So if you see Voxnest, you know that's Spreaker, and take a look because maybe Rob Greenlee is there. If you've seen Rob Greenlee around the podcasting circles, and say hi and tell them that SP said hi.
Exactly. I like Rob Greenlee. We've never actually met in person, but I like him. I respect him. He's been part of the pod space before there was podcasting. Yeah. He'll tell you that story too. It's a fabulous story. So with Rob Greenlee involved in this, it gives it absolutely some credence behind it in my book. So I do want this to succeed for Rob, but for a hobby podcaster, I'm not sure what offerings there are with it. And if we find any, we'll let you know.
Absolutely. So if you're checked out Voxnest or you got any questions on that, please do get in touch with us. You can always email us at podcast@betterpodcasting.com, and you can go to facebook.com/betterpodcasting or tweet us at betterpod. And maybe, just maybe, your feedback will end up in the Better Podback section. Well, it's time to catch up because we were lazy last week and didn't end up giving any of the feedback over to Emily and Jason, which turns out was a good thing because I'm sure they would have just used it to insult us more. So, ha-ha! Our laziness paid off. Take that, Emily and Jason.
So the first bit of feedback that we had came from my co-host on Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D., Sithwitch, and Twitter, @Sithwitch. She also goes by Lauren. And Lauren said, I learned from Stargate Pioneer and Better Pod. Keyboard shortcuts are friends. And this was in response to, hi, Twitter, if you're using an iPhone, what podcast app are you using and why? The why is really important. Also, I am really interested in knowing why you have made a switch to a different app if you did so.
Also, we had the one and only Stargate Pioneer tweet last week saying, I quit Better Podcasting tonight before Steve and John Drew could. Catch our replacements tonight live with Better Podcasting at geeks.live. And to which we had the wonderful Bandrew. I'm just trying to decide whether or not I want to downgrade him after this comment. He tweeted us saying, I'm glad. So yeah, we had the adequate Bandrew Scott say, I'm glad you're both gone since you two talked Emily out of moving to a Mac. So that is the wonderful, okay, semi-reasonable Bandrew Scott.
In fairness, neither of us talked her out of a Mac. She asked for our opinions on a Windows-based PC. We asked her right off the get-go, do you want to do Mac or PC? And she said, I want to do PC. So there you go. It wasn't us that talked her out of it. It was her that said, I want to stay in PC land.
Plus, with the Mac, you probably would have a lot more hard times doing the crazy Skypeosaurus that I know she's going to end up doing, like our wonderful earlier listener that we had at the top of the show. We also had @Tomorrow's Legend tweet us saying, in regard to soundboards, we use SoundPad, which is on Android. Not sure if it's available on Apple, but it's free and simple to use. You can color code each audio clip, adjust volumes, change names, and set it to repeat play as well. This sounds very, very similar to what I use on my old iPad 1, and that is Soundbite. And it's exactly how Soundbite works. You can color code, you can set the loops, you can set the volumes. So sounds like that might be where I want to go in order to dump my last piece of Apple equipment in my podcast setup.
You know what I'm going to do is I am going to boot up my Samsung Note 3. I'm going to see if I can load this on, and I'm going to check it out. And it looks like this could be replacement for me for BossJock Studio, which, by the way, in the last week went back. It reverted to the fact that you can't direct load songs onto BossJock from inside BossJock from Dropbox. So you have to go to Dropbox and you have to open in an app to bring it into the app, then go into recordings and bring it in. So yeah, if that's going to be the future of BossJock, I'm either going to switch to iJingle or something else on the iPad, or I might try this and see if it's good to go. So if that's the case, I might buy myself a cheap Android tablet and see if that'll work as my soundboard for another couple of years. So thank you very much. I appreciate the heads up on that.
Absolutely. And finally, in the Twitter section, we had Allison Innes say, getting caught up on my Better Pod listening. They also get my ideas flowing. We're glad we can help you with that, because we genuinely try to make this a communal experience where we can help each other out. So glad to see that works for you. Now, in our final piece of feedback, it's an email from our wonderful, fantastic, super fan, Johnny Pennington. And Johnny Pennington said the following.
Hey guys, I don't know what you had to do or what you had to give up, but it was very costly for me to negotiate a trade-off with my wife. What am I talking about? Oh, just your timing of having the live stream of Better Podcasting, episode number 118, exactly on Valentine's Day. Yes, Valentine's Day, when a husband and wife should be spending some special time together. I'm not about to tell you the cost to me, and about the look I got from my wife of many decades when I asked her about celebrating Valentine's Day on another day, so I could watch my favorite podcast, Better Podcasting, during its live stream. No way. But just so you will know, I probably now won't have any extra money for podcasting equipment for a long time. And I'll be lucky if I ever get to eat anything better than a bologna sandwich till next Valentine's Day. I can only imagine the concessions you had to make to get permission from your wives for Valentine's Day live stream podcast. Actually, guys, that might make a great Better Podcasting subject for an upcoming show. The non-monetary costs of podcasting. Stress in the household. Looking forward to watching your Valentine's Day show and the Stress from Podcasting show from my couch in the living room where I now sleep. Really? No, I mean, really. Thanks a lot, guys. Johnny Pennington.
Well, Johnny, top of the show, I mentioned that we had a contract that was getting us through this episode. Well, what we're pleased to announce is, as you mentioned, Valentine's is a day to spend with your loved ones and your husbands and your wives. Well, the contract only had to get us through this episode because right now, during this episode, SP and I are getting hitched. We're getting married. So that will just take us through, because then it's a pending divorce that would keep us together. So absolutely, it goes from a contract to marriage vows. So that's what's happening.
Now wait a minute. I've been, I'm wearing my USA hockey jersey.
Right.
It's the Olympics that are ongoing right now.
Yeah.
Have you been keeping tabs on the Olympic figure skating couple story?
No, I have not. But if it ends up with you and me being married, I will go along with it.
Basically, they're saying that married couples never work out on the Olympic stage. And I would say that probably would extend to podcasting as well, because podcasting is basically an Olympic event every week. So maybe we should profess our love for each other in privacy and not on the podcast.
But Valentine's, I doesn't work. No, you did a Valentine's podcast with me. That was the commitment. It was you were going to marry me.
I never signed anything.
All right. Well, joking aside, thank you very much, Johnny, for that. We do sincerely appreciate your email. And yes, we are recording this on Valentine's. It's 1 hour out of our evening, but that's what we do because we have personal lives. And sometimes the only day to record podcasting is on Valentine's, and that's what's going to happen. So if you want to go ahead and send our wives letters begging for our forgiveness, please do that by emailing podcast@betterpodcasting.com. You can go ahead and tweet us @BetterPod, or go ahead and go to facebook.com/betterpodcasting and make sure to send a video along, because the emotional factor is stronger with video, and we really, really, really need to bank on that emotional factor.
We need to bank at some point in time, but won't be with this show.
Awesome. So that is going to take us to the end of the show. Before we wrap up, I want to take a moment here and put all of the kidding and the joking aside and thank sincerely to Emily Prokop and Jason Bryant for their work last week. They put all of that together themselves. They did a fantastic job. We had a couple of things we asked them to do, but aside from it was just basically the structure. They ended up doing a phenomenal job. It was a really awesome topic. It's one we hadn't touched on before, and you both did a fantastic job, and I genuinely appreciated the roasting. I thought that was a lot of fun to listen to, and you did a great job. So thank you both for taking time out of your week to do that.
It was awesome. And what was even more awesome was the fact that we did not prompt them on our usual Better Podcasting like transitions or vernacular or anything. They actually did everything because they listened to the show. They knew how the show ran because they're avid listeners. So thank you very much, Jason and Emily. That was awesome. And we'll probably do it again at some time in the future. Don't know when, don't know who. Don't know if Emily and Jason will ever grace their presence on our screens again or not after we called them out on roasting us, but we'll see what happens in the future. And thank you very much. I loved the episode. I've listened to it actually a few times. So thank you very much.
And also one last confession before we close. And now that we've had people drop off partway through, as well, most podcasts do end up happening, I can go and tell you that I know this is going to be shocking. You guys might want to sit down for this. That voicemail at the top of the show was me. Whoa, I know your mind is blown, right? Totally blown. No, that was me, and that was my story. And that happened after Gonna Geek last week. And yes, the MDX 4600 smelled funky. And I said funky, by the way. And it definitely needs to be replaced or repaired. I'm debating whether or not to do that. I do like having the gating function of it, but it's not a necessity. It is a little bit cleaner wiring directly into the L12 now that I have that. So I'm not sure which way I'm going to go, because I think that since I have the L12, I might just leave the 4600 out, and it'll be a little bit noisier of a live stream, but the final product is still cleaned up. The way that I really use that 4600 is just to make the live stream a little bit cleaner. So I haven't decided which way I'm going to go with it, but we talked about it before on the show. SP has had a couple of Behringer products go, and I think it's a fair statement to say if you Google on the internet, Behringer is not necessarily known for their quality in the public conversation. Now, with that said, I will say for me personally, I've had a pretty good track record with the Behringer products. I had a Mini Mic 800 that lasted me for a while. I had a Behringer, I don't know, it was this tiny little board that lasted me forever, and I really didn't take care of that thing. I had the Behringer 1622 that lasted me right up to when I replaced it with the L12. So I've had some good luck, but inside me, I always knew this day was coming. So that was something that I knew was going to happen at one day. I'm just glad that I caught it before it could have been worse.
And even though I've had multiple Behringer products fail, and I will never recommend them because of that, if you look at the capability of the MDX 4600 versus anything else on the market, it is by far cheaper of a solution. So if you're just entering in the game and you're just trying some technical capabilities out, 4600 is there. I mean, I looked at a DBX version that's like $600 US, by the way, not Canadian. And I looked at some other stuff that was even more expensive to get a gating function with a 4-channel compressor. It's just not cheap. And Behringer made that capability cheap, but also probably with cheaper components. I don't know for sure, but that's probably why it didn't last as long as maybe you were hoping, Stephen. And having experience with sending equipment into Behringer RMA to have them fix it, yes, they do fix it, but you have to pay for shipping at least one way. So
I haven't decided on that, and we'll keep you informed of this, because I do know there are some people who listen to the show that actually have the 4600, and I believe they had it not because I had it. I hope so, because otherwise I feel a little bit bad. But if I don't send it in, I'm going to crack it open myself and see what's up inside. I just haven't decided if I'm going to send it in. So there you go.
Pretty cool.
Maybe we'll have to make that a recurring segment like we had with the L12. It could be like, this is the 4600 watch. That's what we'll make it a little segment.
2018.
Awesome. So that is going to take us to the end of the show for episode 118 of Better Podcasting. I'm Stephen John Drews saying thanks again to Emily and Jason last week. And yes, payback will happen.
And I'm SP saying thank you very much for dropping by, and we hope to see you again next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Better Podcasting. We want to hear from you. You can find all of our contact information at betterpodcasting.com. If you like the show, please consider giving us a 5-star review in iTunes. We encourage you to check out all of the other geeky podcasts available at GonnaGeekNetwork.com. This has been a Gonna Geek production. Thanks for listening, and we will see you again next week.